Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Don Davis, one of the co-founders of the Tucson Paranormal Society. Want to welcome you to Inside Tucson Paranormal, our weekly conference call. And this one certainly is not going to disappoint. Again, we really, really appreciate. I like to start every show that it's not lost on us that there's so many things that are vying for your attention in today's world, and the interest that you have and the support that you've given us. We like to believe comes back to you many times over. So we try to bring amazing content with amazing people. And again, today is not going to disappoint. Today's guest is Mr. David Swift. Although being certainly one of the very early members, one of the early leaders in the Tucson Paranormal Society, but an amazing publisher, amazing magazine publisher. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that as we come on. But David, any introduction I'm going to give you is going to pale by comparison. So why don't you kind of share with our listeners who you are, what you did in your past life, and kind of what dragged you into the world of the paranormal.
Okay, well, let's see, in a past lifetime, I had a bachelor's degree with English literature. I got a master's degree in international administration for public administration and a law degree, and got some postgraduate certificates in clinical psychology. And I've done all kinds of different training with metaphysics, mostly metaphysics and the occult. I've been studying it most of my life. When I was a kid, I remember at 5, 6 years old, I would just sit up every night, every Saturday night. I'd wait till, I don't know if it was 10 or 11 o'clock, but I'd sit up till late at night just waiting for the horror films to come on. My parents would
we all had those. We had
they would be gone. They would be gone on Saturday night, and my brother and I would just sit there and endure all the other garbage that was on TV. And wait, finally 10 o'clock would come around, and we could watch Frankenstein and Dracula and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and Bela Lugosi and everything. And so I just had a fascination with that. It's like you said, like most people have. And I remember when I was in my teenage years, I started reading these books by a guy named Lobsang Rampa. And he lived in Nova Scotia, but his story was that he was born in Tibet, was trained as a monk in a monastery, and one day a tree limb fell on him and he was in a coma. And he claims that his soul then was looking for another body to take over. So he found this guy in Nova Scotia, Canada, and they agreed to trade souls because the guy was not happy with his life and he wanted to commit suicide. So they made an agreement. And the soul of the guy in Canada took over the body in Tibet. And the guy in Tibet took over the body in Canada. And the other guy died. And Lobsang was able to continue on to a ripe old age. And he wrote books about his life in Tibet, living in the monastery, and he taught all these very paranormal teachings about clairvoyance and telepathy and astral projection. And so he wrote about 12 books. I think the most famous one was called The Third Eye. And so that had a huge impact on my life. And I read all the Edgar Casey books at a very early age. And so I just became fascinated with it. And I've pretty much just been involved with metaphysics and the paranormal literally for most of my life.
It's always interesting that, everyone that I've talked to has some connection with the paranormal. Started very early. I'm 4 or 5 years old, fascinated by, just the things that, most kids would be afraid of and kind of recoil from. And yet, and I'm right there with you, and we were drawn to this. So, when you look at the world of the paranormal, the history of it is fascinating because it literally goes back to the dawn of man, as you mentioned. So you want to kind of share your historical thoughts?
Well, the paranormal literature basically encompasses the supernatural, ghosts, haunted places, psychic abilities, and it seems to have, for some reason, a very enduring popularity and appeal with humans. They just have a strong fascination with this. which comes from a number of psychological and cultural factors, basically with your desire to understand the unknown. But the early books, you wanted to talk about the literature, some of the early books were Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and more modern types of literatures like Stephen King's The Shining, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, the Twilight series, between the vampires and the werewolves, the romance stories, Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, who also recently has one of her books that's come out now in the movies is called The Mayfair Witches. And so paranormal literature has literally undergone, a lot of transformation over the years. It adapts to societal changes, and it adapts to cultural trends and to technology. But it kind of started, I think, with oral tradition, with the folklore, the myths about ghosts and spirits and supernatural beings. And a lot of it originated with the tales of what was going on in Egypt with the pyramids and the curses of the tombs and Greek mythology and the underworld, the Norse gods and that sort of thing. In the 19th century, there was a huge surge of spiritualism. And so people became very fascinated with paranormal literature. And then in the 21st century, things got to be a little bit more shock and gore, you might say, added to it. Not much for the weak-hearted, like the Alien series that became a movie with Sigourney Weaver. And it just constantly is changing. The literature sometimes it kind of crosses over into science fiction. But you've got gothic fiction, you've got paranormal romances, you've got supernatural horror, you've got urban fantasy, like you might remember that movie Candyman, psychological thrillers, and they always do fall back on folklore and the old legends. A lot of the themes have to do with the fear of the unknown, the death and the afterlife, good versus evil, eerie, desolate settings where people feel like they're kind of trapped. You might have struggles with grief and guilt and trauma. There's a thin line between reality and illusion that people talk about a lot, or whether even supernatural events are truly happening, or if they're just figments of your imagination. So you get all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that, David, because, obviously before the advent of science that we know now, everything seemed magic, to our early ancestors, the fact that the sun came up every day was another reason to, get on your knees and pray for the reoccurring sun god. Now we understand science and we understand a lot of the natural things, but and I think you're right. It's almost like even with everything we know, there still seems to be this giant body of question marks of the stuff we don't know, that science is amazing as it is. And then the more science we get, it just contradicts what we knew before. So, we were sure that the earth was flat, right? The greatest minds on the earth, bloodletting was the way, if you were sick, you got bad blood, take that out. Now, we realize that, again, that was stupid at the time. I'm wondering if 50 or 100 years in the future, the things that we're absolutely convinced that are true now are going to be deemed, I don't want to say stupid, but going to be deemed inappropriate or in fact wrong. But it's that superstition, it's that believing in magic that seems to be dragged even to our scientific world. You look at all of our, like you mentioned, popular literature, our most successful movies, our most successful books, the things that seem to, I always kiddingly say, when you look at television, what's the only thing that's not on the Travel Channel? Travel, because 80% of it is paranormal programming. Do you think that's just the new acceptance of what's happening in the world?
It kind of goes along with what's going on. Yeah, absolutely. what's happening in the world tends to affect the way we look at the paranormal. And there's a lot of psychologists actually that say that when you're in times of stress, like we are now, uncertainty, at times of uncertainty, there's loss, that people turn to the paranormal. They look to it for explanations to help make sense of what they're experiencing. They don't know they want to be in control. Humans want to be in control. They don't understand something. They don't know why this is happening. So maybe they could look to the paranormal to figure out why the world is happening the way it is. I can't tell you how many people I know that if there's an earthquake, like in Haiti one time when they had the big earthquake in Haiti, I heard people saying, well, they deserve that, well, they do voodoo down there. It's God's getting them for that, people, they will take natural disasters and try to blame it on something supernatural. Happens all the time. It's just a way to explain the unknown. You're in a stressful situation. You're trying to figure out, sometimes people blame God. Sometimes they blame, something else. To blame
well, now, no, and again, and I share with them, I'm devoutly Catholic, and even the religion that I vehemently feel is to my soul, it's still fraught with spiritualism and mysticism and demons and ghosts, and I mean all these things surround this religion that it's interesting. But when you and I first met, one of the first things you had mentioned was that you were an attorney for most of your professional life, and that's a person that is very based on evidence and what you can actually look at and hold, and and obviously moving into the world of the paranormal, especially in transformational publishing, which is absolutely fantastic. What made this person whose life was steeped in evidence and legitimacy and things that are concrete, still have this affinity for the world of the paranormal?
Well, the paranormal, like I say, I've been doing it my whole life. The law practice that I did came after that, and that was mostly because of my wife. She woke up one day. I woke up and she said, "Hey, why don't we go to law school?" And I, sure. What the hell? Let's go.
And that's how everybody goes to law school. They wake up in the morning and say, I want to dedicate all of my life to this really, really hard. So then, what tilted you then? Obviously, you had a background in English and in writing. So then, transformational publishing, that now seems like a much more logical segue. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. When did it start? Kind of what you're doing right now, because it is truly fascinating.
Well, after a 20-year law practice with being married, my kids went off to college, and I was just kind of burned out, quite frankly. I was pretty stressed out with the law practice. I'd made a lot of money with it, but I just felt totally stressed out. I wanted to get back into balance. I wanted to get back into wholeness and get myself back together and to feel good about things. And so my wife and I decided to go our separate ways, and I moved down to Florida and started writing books. I retired basically from the law practice and decided I'd always wanted to write books, so I just started writing. So for 15 years, I wrote my own books, and I was taking care of my parents who were living in Florida. They were, getting elderly and needed this and that. So I stayed down there until they both passed away. And in 2018, after my mother passed on, I started thinking about moving to Tucson because both my kids had gone to the University of Arizona, and my daughter lives in Phoenix. And I just felt that I wanted to be a little closer to my daughter, but not actually be right there. So I moved out to Tucson and decided that I would start start a publishing company, start helping other people to write books. And started with transformation. The name of my book, my author book writing was Transformational Novels. And so I just called the publishing company Transformational Publishing. And people were asking me all the time, well, what does that mean, transformational publishing? And I said, well, we live in transformational times, so that's what this is about. But I added it. I also work under the name of Arizona Book Publishing, and so transformational publishing is for spiritual books, paranormal books, metaphysical books, things like that. And the Arizona Book Publishing is for memoirs and general fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and things like that. So in 2026, I'm probably just going to specialize in only taking paranormal books, which would include inspirational, spiritual, mystical, occult, and metaphysical, and maybe some sci-fi.
And I think everybody has that. I think everyone has that great novel in them somewhere. It's just a question of coming out. And and now, since there's such an appetite for the paranormal, those that are already kind of tilted towards that are writers like yourself, I think now have a marketplace that, so when somebody comes to transformational publishing, what is the kind of stuff that you would do for them? So if I came to you and said, I've got this great novel in my mind, but I'm a horrible writer, which I am, how do you work them through the process? Like, you get started, how do you, what do you do? What do you offer?
Yeah, well, there's three parts of it, basically. Someone has to write the book. So there's the writing. The second part is, and all of these are three different hats completely. The first hat is that someone's got to write the book. The second hat is it's got to be published, which means it has to be formatted into book form. You got to set it up as like a 6x9 or a 10x10 or an 8x8, whatever size book you want. It's going to be hardback, paperback. It has to have the numbers on the pages, has to be the headings at the top with the author's name and the name of the book and the copyright page and everything. There's all this formatting that has to go through. And then that also includes getting it onto the internet so that it can be sold. That's the publishing part. And then the third part is selling the book. That's the greatest question in the world is, how do I sell my book? I've only got so many brothers and sisters and they all want to read it. So, they just people. So people want to know, how do I sell it?
Right. Every author has the 1,000 books in boxes in their garage. They bought 1,000 and there's 990 still left in there 3 years later. So
unfortunately, that happens.
Well, it does, but it's interesting that, again, in the publishing world, that most publishers really aren't as holistic as you are. It's been my experience through book publishing that it's like, here's your book, there you go. Or a lot of times it's like you actually help your people with the writing, right? You'll actually help them with the process of the writing.
Yeah, I do. It's called book coaching. I coach them through getting the book done. I help them get the book set up, and then I make myself available 24/7 until the book gets finished. I'm there for them every step of the way for any questions that they have about anything, and we get the book finished one way or another, and hopefully within 6 months rather than 6 years. And then I publish it for them. I get it on the internet so they start getting royalties sent to them. And then if they want me to help them sell it, I also do that. It's optional. Some people don't, because I take a fee for that. I mean, I'm not just gonna, I take a percentage of the sales if that's what you want me to do. But if you want to do it yourself, you can do it yourself. But eventually they come around and say, I can't sell any books, help me. So, so then we put it on all our social media sites, and we do videos, and we do podcasts and radio interviews and just all sorts of things, and start getting the word out. And I do that for about a year. I take a year contract to help them sell their book. And then after that, it's usually, it's sellable at that point, and it's making some money. Yeah. So one of the things go ahead.
I was going to say, and just for our listeners as well, that's expanded into. So not only do you have this publishing empire developing, which, by the way, if you've really not seen for our listeners, I'm going to absolutely encourage you to, and we'll give all that information out there on how to reach out to David. It really, really is a smooth, easy process. And as I always say, I think everybody has that great novel in them, but so many people, I think, never actually make it happen, whether it's a memoir that tells about your life or anything, absolutely do that. But you've now expanded beyond just books and now magazines as well in the Arizona Paranormal Times.
Sure. So we have now we have, and this was Don's idea. I'll give him credit for that. It was Arizona Paranormal Times, And so when I came on to Tucson Paranormal Society about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years, I'm not sure, he said, we're looking for someone to do the magazine, and I volunteered to do it and have been with it ever since. And so what's so wonderful about it is it gives people an opportunity to write a paranormal article. You don't have to write a full book. You're going to write an article, and it gets and it gets you published. And you can say I'm a published author for a magazine article, and we pretty much let you write about whatever you want to. I'm not telling you have to write about this or that. You can write whatever floats your boat, and as long as it's not something too crazy.
Right.
But generally, I've never rejected one yet. I mean, I'd be honest, I haven't turned away a single person in nearly 2.5 years. So,
yeah, I think we're very fortunate that the people that contribute to the magazine are really people that love it and have the same affinity that we do as well. So, and it's interesting because, and I always kiddingly say, be careful what you tell me, because, I'm just really for David's accolades. What we had in mind for a magazine was kind of some little, pimpy black and white, 3-page something or other that's going to come out. And for those that have not seen the Arizona Paranormal Times, it is absolutely not only beautiful, created, written, the advertising, the quality of the content of the articles. I mean, it's really incredibly impressive to consider that it has a mature look, like it's been around for 30 years, but yet we're only on what, our fourth, maybe fifth issue, I think, sixth issue.
No, this is the eight. We've done eight issues.
That's right. Okay, 8 issues. Yeah, for once a quarter. So it's been such an amazing experience, and it's such an incredible magazine. Is it really that different? Is a magazine that different than putting a book together?
Yeah, it's completely different animal. But still, I guess someone submits me an article and I have to format it for the magazine. I have to completely reformat the article so it fits into the magazine. But it still requires proofreading and editing and all the same things that I do with a book.
Sure.
But what we're getting ready to do now is a paranormal writing contest, and we're going to call it a amateur paranormal writing contest, so that people don't feel they have to be real professional with it. But what my goal is to get maybe about 100 people to contribute an article, because we've decided that the magazine has been free. The last 8 issues have been free, but we're getting ready to make it a subscription magazine, which isn't going to be much. It's only going to be like $16.99 a year, $16 a year, something like that. But if you submit an article for $7, you'll get a whole year's subscription to the magazine. And so it's also a fundraiser, for Tucson Paranormal Society and for the magazine. But if we could get maybe 100 people to submit articles, they would all get a year subscription. Now, the winner would get a $50 prize for the best article, and we will have judges who will be judging the articles. So it might be fun, and we'll see how it goes.
No, I think it's a wonderful idea, because there are so many, amateur writers that maybe don't want to take the leap into a full-blown book, but they have a great story that's been percolating for a while, and to get it into this venue and then get it in front of, professional writers to critique and help them develop that skill, maybe hone it on their message. To me, I always kiddingly say the highest compliment that I could ever give somebody was, I wish this was my idea. And I remember the first time David told me, I'm like, damn, I wish that was my idea, right? Because it was just so good, because it so aligns itself with not only transformational publishing's message, and I think that it's kind of, that everybody has that writer in them, varying degrees and varying stages, but I think everybody has that writer in them. And then obviously now we've got this magazine platform. And I know that you had talked about possibility doing some kind of compendium book, taking a lot of these, great stories and putting them into an environment where you can share them in more kind of like a book application. You may want to share a little bit about that as well.
Well, for about the last year or so, probably a year and a half, we've been trying to find 10 or 12 people to each write say a 20 or 20-page short story. I was looking for 10 or 12 authors to write short stories about the paranormal and to put that into a compendium book. But it just hasn't panned out. We haven't been able to find 10 or 12 authors. I've had maybe up to 4 people willing to do it. So we're starting to get close. But then we came up with the idea of, well, let's do this writing contest for the magazine. And we can just take all of those articles. People will give us their permission, of course. But for those who will give us their permission, we'll take those articles and put together our first book. And I'm not sure what the title will be, but I would be okay with just calling it the Tucson Paranormal Writing Contest, or something like that. But just put together a book of every submission, everything people submit that give us permission, and put it into a book. So I think and that would also then the person can say they're a published author in a book, because their name will be in there. They'll be listed as one of the authors, and we'll do the book project after we do the contest.
Sure, which I think is a great jumping off point, especially when you're talking about literature or writing or a desire to write. Sometimes just a really supportive person doing it, a supportive person to help you is really all you need. And I just happened to glance at the clock, and I always say this: we always run out of time before we run out of conversation, and today is no different. So David, thank you so much. Can you share with our listeners how they get a hold of you, phone numbers, emails, website, things of that nature?
Absolutely. I do have a Tucson phone number, but I don't have it here in front of me. So let me give you my other one. It's from Florida. It's 850-252-0706, 850-252-0706. And the email would be Arizona Paranormal Times @gmail.com. Arizona Paranormal Times @gmail.com.
Right. And if anybody would like, they can always reach out to the Tucson Paranormal Society. We'll make sure that we get you connected. So thank you so much, David. It was an absolute privilege. I mean, you and I have known each other for quite a while, and I am absolutely amazed on what you've been able to accomplish in your corner of the world. Any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners before we close for today?
Just that paranormal writing has all sorts of benefits. It'll really help you out with your emotional stuff going on. It gives you creative expression. It allows you to engage with other people. You learn things. I mean, you bond with the community. It's just so many benefits with doing it. And I encourage everybody to start off with a paranormal article and then think about writing a book.
I could not agree more. I think I'm even going to try to throw my $7 into Kitty and throw something in there. I got a story percolating in the back of my mind. But David, I'm going to need a lot of help. So I'll be your charity project for that. So, but thank you so much for all of our listeners. So, it's always a privilege to do this. The Tucson Paranormal Society was started kind of as a concept to try to explain the unexplainable. And in the, very short time that we've been around, it's been absolutely incredible. The quality of people like David that have been kind enough to support this effort, the conversations, the meetings that we do, the people that have joined in our members. It's an absolute privilege to do this. So on behalf of all of the Tucson Paranormal members and people here in the Tucson area, the paranormal community, thank you so much for joining us, and it's an absolute privilege. Everybody do a great thing. I always like to, keep Tucson spooky, but, not too spooky, because I want to be scared. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to having you join us next Monday. Bye-bye.